October 14th, 1983, 2:14 a.m., the New Jersey Turnpike. A ribbon of black asphalt that serves as the jugular vein of the East Coast. Most people see a highway. The men in the vault see a conveyor belt of illicit gold. Inside a nondescript 1982 Chevy Caprice, two men are holding their breath. They aren't looking at the road anymore. They are looking in the rearview mirror at a pair of flashing lights that have just signaled the end of an era. They haven't committed a murder tonight. They haven't robbed a bank. They were driving 10 miles under the speed limit, invisible, ghosts in the machine. But as the car hit a pothole near exit 13, a small piece of brittle red plastic gave way. A single bulb exposed a white light where there should have been red. A mechanical violation. A routine stop. The driver, a soldier for the Lucchese family named Sal the Spark Vitale, knows the rules. You don't panic. You show your license. You take the ticket. But Sal has a problem. Tucked under the spare tire in the trunk isn't just a shipment of high-purity Colombian white. It's a ledger, a billion-dollar map of the most sophisticated narcotics distribution network in American history. One broken bulb, one bored patrolman, and the largest drug ring in the Western Hemisphere is about to bleed out on the side of the road. Welcome back to the vault. Pull your chair in. Today's file is a masterclass in the butterfly effect of the underworld. We spend our lives looking for the grand betrayals, the rats, the hits, the wiretaps. But the archives teach us that more empires have been destroyed by a lack of maintenance than by the FBI. In the 1980s, the five families were moving more weight than a Fortune 500 company. They were efficient. They were disciplined. They were billionaires who still lived in modest houses to stay off the radar. But there is a psychological trap that comes with that kind of power. The delusion of invincibility. They thought they had bought the judges. They thought they had bought the docs. They forgot that they couldn't buy the probability of a faulty light bulb. Tonight we analyze the billion-dollar drug ring that fell apart because a courier forgot to spend $10 at a hardware store. This is the truth behind the Hollywood myths. This is the file of the broken taillight. By 1982, the Lucchese and Gambino families had formed an unholy alliance. They had seen the Medellin cartel rising in the South and realized that heroin was the past. Cocaine was the future. It was cleaner, it was more profitable, and every Wall Street banker in Manhattan wanted it. They set up a commissary. It was a logistics hub that would make Amazon look disorganized. They used the connection at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Every Tuesday, a freighter would arrive with a legitimate shipment of Ecuadorian bananas or Colombian coffee. But tucked inside the false walls of the containers were kilos marked with a black diamond stamp. The Lucchese's handled the distribution. They had a fleet of clean cars, old sedans, minivans, station wagons, cars that looked like they belonged to school teachers and grocery clerks. They avoided the mafia look. No Cadillacs, no Lincolns, no flash. The system was moving 50 kilos a week. That's $1 billion annual turnover in 1983 money. It was the perfect crime, governed by the perfect system, until the system met the New Jersey State Police. Salvatore Vitale wasn't a hero. He wasn't a boss. He was a mule. In the archives, we call men like Sal the disposable soldiers. They are the ones who take all the risk for a fraction of the reward. Sal got his nickname, the Spark, not because he was bright, but because he was a former electrician who had a habit of overthinking things. He was obsessed with the big picture, but blind to the details. He spent his nights worrying about the FBI's satellite surveillance, but he hadn't washed his car in 3 weeks. He was driving the Caprice because it was invisible. But invisible only works if the car is in perfect working order. A car with a broken taillight is a beacon. It's an invitation. When Officer Miller pulled behind Sal on the turnpike, Miller wasn't looking for a drug bust. He was looking to make his quota for the night. Sal's fatal mistake wasn't just the light. It was his reaction. When the officer approached the window, Sal didn't act like a professional. He acted like a man who was sitting on $1 billion. He sweated. He stuttered. He gave a fake name that didn't match the registration. And that's when Officer Miller decided to look in the trunk. When the trunk popped, Miller found the cocaine. That would have been a 5-year sentence for Sal. A cost of doing business for the Lucchese's. But Miller found something else. Underneath the carpet, wrapped in plastic, was Sal's security. Sal, being the overthinker he was, had kept a record. He didn't trust the bosses to pay him his full commission. He had documented every delivery, every contact, and every drop house address in the tri-state area. He had even listed the nicknames of the men who received the shipments: Tony Hooks, Big Paulie, Jimmy the Gent. In the underworld, this is known as the death note. You don't write things down. You don't leave a trail. But Sal thought he was being smart. He thought he was building leverage. Instead, he had just handed the DEA a roadmap to the most powerful men in America. The archives show that within 4 hours of this traffic stop, the FBI was already at the Lucchese Social Club on First Avenue. The billion-dollar ring wasn't just broken, it was decapitated. Why does a man moving $1 billion of narcotics ignore a 5-cent bulb? This is the question that haunts the investigative historians. It's a psychological phenomenon called scope insensitivity. When you are dealing with millions of dollars and life-or-death decisions, your brain stops processing the small things. You focus on the commission, the launderers, the hitmen. You forget that the world is governed by the mundane. Sal Vitale had a strategic mind, but a tactical failure. He was thinking about the drug trade in South America, while his taillight was vibrating loose on a Jersey highway. This is how the Mafia died. Not in a blaze of glory, not in a grand betrayal, but in the slow accumulation of minor errors. The archives are full of these small failures. A phone call made from a traced line. A meeting held in a park that was already under surveillance. A broken taillight. The Mafia was a dinosaur that didn't notice the small mammals eating its eggs until it was too late. The fallout was catastrophic. Based on Sal's ledger, the DEA launched Operation Red Light. Over the next 48 hours, 32 high-ranking members of the Lucchese and Gambino families were arrested. They found the commissary in Brooklyn. They seized $40 million in cash and 2 tons of cocaine. But the real damage was to the code. Sal Vitale, facing a life sentence because of that ledger, did what everyone in the 80s eventually did. He flipped. He didn't just give them the drug ring, he gave them the commission. He explained how the families shared the pier, how they bribed the longshoremen, and how they moved the money through a series of pizza parlors in Queens. The billion-dollar ring had become a billion-dollar liability. The Ivy League of crime was now sitting in orange jumpsuits, all because Sal the Spark Vitale couldn't be bothered to check his blinkers. The archives show that after the bust, the Mafia changed its transport protocols. They started hiring legitimate trucking companies. They started using decoys. But the trust was gone. The handshake at the pier was replaced by fear. The bosses realized that their lives were in the hands of men like Sal, men who were overworked, underpaid, and prone to the small mistakes that change history. Sal Vitale vanished into the witness protection program. Some say he's living in a trailer park in Arizona, still checking his taillights every night before he goes to bed. The Lucchese family never recovered their dominance in the narcotics trade. The cartel took over the distribution directly. The Mafia had been cut out of the loop by a broken piece of plastic. We look for the high drama. We look for the Scorsese ending. But the reality of the underworld is often much more pathetic. A billion-dollar empire, built on blood and discipline, was toppled by a mechanical violation on a rainy Tuesday morning. The Vault reminds us, the bigger the empire, the more vulnerable it is to the small things. The Lucchese's forgot to sweat the small stuff, and the small stuff is what sent them to the grave. The file on the broken taillight is now closed. But the archives are deep, and some secrets are even more confined. We talk about the bosses who lived in mansions. We talk about the dons who ruled from the Waldorf. But what happens when the most feared man in Italy has to hide from the world? What happens when a king is forced to live in a space no bigger than a closet for 5 years? Next time, we uncover the story of the man who ruled a continent from behind a shower curtain. Next file, the boss who lived in a bathroom for 5 years. You have been granted access to the truth behind the myths. But the Vault has many more secrets to reveal. If you want to be there when we open the next file, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications. The archives are deep, and the light is fading. Comment below, was Sal Vitale a fool, or was the Mafia's collapse inevitable? I'll be in the comments to hear your take.